poetry make an impact in an ever more uncertain world? Well, today on the stream, we'll hear from 3 Black Muslim writers whose work is reinvigorating the art form. I'm Femi Oke.
I'm Malika Bilal. Send your questions and your comments via Twitter and, as always, on YouTube for this special show.
In the US, interest in poetry is reaching new heights, with the number of people here reading poetry almost doubling over the last 5 years.
The National Endowment for the Arts says the biggest increase in poetry readership is among young, non-white people between 18 and 24. And young Black Muslims are in the vanguard of those presenting compelling poetry to new audiences here in the US.
Today, we are joined by 3 poets who are boosting the profile of the art form. Tariq Touré is a West Baltimore-born writer whose work examines social justice, arts and culture, and Black Muslim experiences. His latest book, he happens to have just right in front of him, is called Parts Oxygen, and it examines faith, family, and fatherhood.
Sadiyah Bashir is a 2-time Youth Poetry Grand Slam champion. Her most recent book, 7, surveys the challenges that society places on Black Muslim women and offers a spirited message on how to overcome adversity.
And Mohamed Tall is the 2017 Baltimore City Youth Poet Laureate. He starts our show with Invisible Cage.
Listen to my heart go. Boom, bap, boom, bap, boom, bap. God made it do that. God made it do that. God made it do that. Do that. Do that. Boom, bap, boom, bap, boom, bap. Capitalism wants to put an end to that. That's God in me. Because to them, God is wealth. But God himself ain't never been dollar bill green. I've seen politicians baptized in false dreams. But I've been graced with sight keen enough to see past the facade and recognize God. That's because I've been graced with the spirit of Fidel, ready to castrate my ghetto with the Castro and my falsetto, waging war against minimum wage with the rage of Fela Kuti in a kufi, witnessing the bloody aftermath capitalism leaves behind. And when you're left behind, the machine says you're fine. Then it takes your struggle and it tries to refine. Like sugar, it's a domino effect. God bless how we resurrect, then take our bones and add to the shrine. How divine death must be. That's what the poor man, who used to be the floor man, before he was a full man, before blacks were whole man, he knew he was a whole man. He needs somebody to hold man. They held him down and whole man. Square. Cops never cared. So today he gotta hold hands and pray. Like Che Guevara fighting terror. Saddam's mom reading the Quran for me. Some say dying while fighting should be an honor to me. But them people ain't really down for the cause. Because if they could, they put me down for the cause. Just because. Then they'll ask Malcolm, how come? And he'll say with a grin like Martin, Muhammad should have known that the marksmen already marked him. Men who speak against the invisible cage are marked men. The invisible hand left Karl Marx with marks around his neck. Asphyxiated flesh fills cotton fields. I feel filled with cotton. How this white man keep me picking on myself? See, I might have caught 10 if I never caught on to the boast of the Gold Coast. Kwame Nkrumah, removing the tumor. Eurocentric temptress attempted to make black men their own prison for profit. Now all our prophets in prison. Mandela's medallion keeps my smile living, even though they tried to annex my chest. So I make sure that I'm always Teflon vested, Cornell West kid, came from the West Side, living in the West End, Mouth Smith and Wesson, gun but the government. Tell them that I'm mental, tell them that I'm mental. This poem right here was made to dismantle the invisible cage.
You are watching Poetry on the Stream, and our community is feeling it. Khalafullah here says, Mohamed Tall, who you just saw perform, is a lyrical prodigy. That's poetic delivery and performances have always wowed me. Very proud of him and his achievements, being Poet Laureate of Baltimore and all. Another person writes in, this is Amija, she says, I became extremely infatuated with Mohamed's poetry when I was first introduced to slam poetry, particularly his wordplay and use of rhyme and cadence. It's safe to say he has influenced my poetry style in many different ways throughout the last couple of years. So Mohamed, you are at a point where you are influencing younger poets out there, but I want to talk about how you got started, because I know there was a point in your life where you were told you weren't good enough to be a poet.
Definitely. In high school, I was attending a school, and basically they didn't think I had what it took to compete for spoken word in a specific competition. A year later, I transferred schools, and we had a theater arts class, and the drill for that day was to tell a story. And it didn't matter which medium we chose, we just had to tell a story. And I remember a year ago, I wrote a poem, and I said, I was comfortable in the class, everybody loved me. I was like, let me share this poem with y'all. And when I shared it, everybody went crazy.
What happened?
They just went crazy. Like everybody was like, "Oh, yo, that's hot, that's hot!" Like, like it was a very like diverse group of young people, and it just took off from there. My mentor at the time, Jacob Mayberry, he heard about my performance, and he came and met with me after class, and he said, "I want you to come to our poetry club on Thursday." And so when I went to the poetry club, I performed the same poem. And he was like, "Congratulations, you're on the Baltimore City Youth Poetry Team." Ooh. And a year ago, Sadiyah was telling me, "You need to join this team. You need to sign up. You have what it takes." And I was like, "Nah, I don't think I have what it takes." So as soon as we left the room, I ran to the bathroom and I called Sadiyah. I was like, "Yo, I'm on the Baltimore City Youth Poetry Team."
Sadiyah, on my laptop, I've got a picture from your Twitter profile picture, and I am wondering are you born a poet? Does that poetry come in you? When you were that little, having your hair done, were you already a poet?
I think so. I think a lot of what you see in just like my development created the poetry. A lot of the poetry that I speak on, especially in the new book that I just published, 7, it has a lot to do with my development and growing up and the things that I saw as a child, both trauma and triumph. So I think those were really the foundational moments to create the poet that is here today.
Mm. So we are getting a few questions online. There's a lot of love for all of you. I will just say, put that out there. But there are a few questions on how one even gets started. So I'll give this one to you, Tariq. Eve writes into the stream, how old were you when you started writing and performing? And was it difficult for you to find poets you felt that you could identify with?
I started writing when I was about 7, but I didn't perform an actual poem until I was a freshman in college. And I basically was redshirting my freshman year from football, and that means you just have nothing to do basically but just like lift weights. And they had a Black History Month program, and I ended up being asked to do something there because people knew that I wrote. And like Mohamed said, like you're done reading it, and then like there's a pause, and then like people start going crazy, and I was like sitting there like, okay, like, okay, I guess this is a thing now. So I started publicly sharing myself. I think that for me, it was people like Amir Suleiman, who's a great poet that I just came across one of his videos, and then I started watching more like deaf poetry stuff, and I was like, I think I might want to do that. I was interested, but when I learned that I could actually write and participate in the art form, it kind of just took off from there. Yep.
Sadiyah, when did you know that you were good?
When did I know that I was good? Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. For me, it was a situation, I don't know if I would qualify this as good, but it was a situation where I had dealt with like, a lot and like trying to get into poetry. So originally I tried out for like different poetry teams and I didn't make it. And then I went up to Baltimore. At the time I was living in Prince George's County, and my mom was like, "You want to go where? Baltimore? Like, that's so far." And so I was like, "I just really want to do this, Mom. I just really want to try out. Can we just do this?" So she drives me all the way up to Baltimore, and I performed. And like they said, there's a moment where everyone's silent. They just take a moment, and then like no one even said anything. The coach and the founder, Kenneth Morrison, he like pulled my mom to the side and he was like, "Listen, I understand that you all live very far, but we need her on the team." And for me, that was like, wow, because I had dealt with like so much rejection like in the process and stuff like that, that it was just like, wow. Like,
all right, Sadiyah, we're not going to make people wait anymore to see you perform live, so I know you're going to get ready while Malika does this.
And no more rejection there. So Sadiyah will now perform for Layan, a message to her niece about the strength and lineage in her skin color. And while she gets ready, have a listen to Vanessa Taylor, a Philadelphia writer who explains why Sadiyah's work is so important to her.
People often forget how influential Black Muslims have been to art in the United States, from the blues' similarity to the Adhan to the Black arts movement. But often when we do talk about Black Muslims, we only focus on the men. So Sadiyah's work is so important because she's a Black Muslim woman actively transcribing her own history. And that kind of follows in the footsteps of Black womanists who have came before, such as Lucille Clifton, who often wrote about finding self. And that theme is something that I see greatly reflected in Sadiyah's book 7.
For when my niece grows up, with too much backbone for men to kneel before her stand and a tongue as sharp as fire, and she asks me, Auntie, what do you do with skin that screams terror? I will tell her, right, 'cause I'd be well too ignorant to tell you not to, sister. You a soldier, siphon the melanin in your skin for ink, so join your truth, but know that they will come for you, even when you're too broke to buy a stamp to send for them, and their privilege will try to take all the letters off of your page to write their legacy. And once there is no more ink, their privilege will say, well, I don't see color. So ask God to make you of ink, for when you are broken and bloody from them, you can rewrite your legacy by tenderly caressing your skin, 'cause there's an angel in you. And God sent you a book that rhymes so that you could define the divine in you. Name one of our prophets who wasn't a poet, whose tone was more of suns to shine for you. And she will ask me, what kind of poetry does your skin love to recite? And I will tell her, I'm into writing poems that breathe like survivors, for writers never die. We make heartbeats out of syllables and an eternity out of semicolons. For when my niece grows up with too much backbone for men to kneel before her stand and a tongue as sharp as fire, and she asks me, Auntie, what do you do with skin that screams terror? I will tell her, let it be heard, for your skin is the most supreme spoken word.
The words of Sadiyah Bashir. Our community is responding. Amiha says the two things that Sadiyah always puts an emphasis on are speaking your truth, I think you just heard her do that, and not ending your poems in victimhood. With her help, I've been able to take and bring a level of rawness and poetry and power to my poetry, which didn't exist before. And another person writes in that she's had the pleasure of watching Sadiyah perform and says that she loves it because for me, it was the first time as a Black Muslim that I saw part of myself reflected in poetry. Femi.
Sadiyah, do you feel that you have an extra responsibility that the gentlemen on either side of you don't have? You're all representing, but then you're representing up here.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah?
I feel like it's just kind of like you already have a responsibility as a Black person, you already have a responsibility as a Muslim, and then I'm a woman, so it's like I have that responsibility as well. This isn't to take away from the fact that, you know, they have their own intersections, but yeah, I feel like I have a responsibility to represent all of my voices.
You know, there are people online that, of course, that they relate to that and they relate to what you're saying, but they also relate then to the men on the panel. So this is a person, I read his tweet a little bit earlier. He follows up, Khalafullah says, I've been a follower of these two young brothers for a couple of years now. And it's really inspiring how talented they are and how well they capture emotions and reflections from the perspective of young Black Muslim men. So I want to pick up on that theme to go to this tweet. This is Jacob Mayberry. He's also a poet, and I've been going through his Twitter feed. Just scroll through it. You'll see some powerful performances there. He says, Baltimore spoken word represents the ultimate mixture of message and emotion, the power in the writing and the performer. We strive to affect change with our poems, so they have to be next level. Mohamed, what is Baltimore spoken word? How does it differ? What sets it apart?
If I could make one point.
Please
so
do.
Jacob is actually my mentor that came to me in the classroom that day.
All comes full circle.
It all comes full circle. I think a major emphasis that's placed, especially in poetry in Baltimore, is that it has to be social justice driven, and we utilize it as more of a tool to build community more so than anything. Like that's kind of like how the foundation is laid. So a lot of the young poets that you see coming out of the city are more socially inclined. and they want to do the work. They want to see change occur, and I feel like poetry is the conduit for that.
Tariq, I know you know there's a connection, you feel there is a connection between the art form of poetry making social change and then it really impacting people's lives. You've heard that, you've seen it. Can you share one of those stories with us?
I was in Dallas, and literally there was a kid who came to see one of my performances, and afterwards he came up to me, he was like really teary-eyed, and I had did a poem about my mother, and he said, look, you know, I don't know you, but I just had the worst argument with my mother. Like, we just completely just fell out before I came here. And he was like, everything you said, he said, I really think I'm gonna go talk to her. So for me, I think a lot about our relationships and how our relationships suffer with under all of these systems, and how we lose people. And the fact that he was able to do that for me was big. It was something that really touched me. And it wasn't the first time that happened, but the intensity of that moment really struck me. And I was just in awe. I was like speechless. I read all these poems, and now I'm just like, okay, thank you. But I think it's very powerful. Back to what Mohamed said, Baltimore, we're just spoiled with poets. I will say that over and over again. It's a city that's spoiled with poets, and prayerfully, the art will continue to thrive, and it's going to be so many more years down the line, more kids coming up here, and yeah, so.
You know, you don't come to be on the stream and be a spoken word poet without performing, so I know you are going to go and get ready.
We're going to do something.
Yeah, you get ready. Malika.
So our guests were talking about Baltimore being spoiled for poets. Grim Jackson here, I think, would agree. Grim says, poetry in Baltimore will be as big as hip hop in less than 10 years' time. The world wants content now. Rap and hip hop nowadays don't provide the same nourishments anymore. And they go on to say, you'll hear the Baltimore sound in a lot of national poets simply because they admire and envy the work that we do.
All right, so you are going to see Tariq perform. All you need to know about this poem is that it is about African Americans in the United States embracing Islam again from their heritage in Africa. This is a beautiful title. I Found God in a Bean Pie. Tariq Touré.
I found God in a bean pie. I've seen kufis placed atop the heads of felons whose smiles could swallow the Mississippi. I've witnessed the crackling Morse code of Tasbih, double for a life raft. Watched Dua incinerate a suicide note. The Islam I know turned Melba the dope fiend to Maryam the philosopher, Malcolm the animal, to Shabazz. Ships set sail in the name of Isa, Jesus, Jesus, prophetic nouns inscribed on the broadside of vessels, blessed by the highest councils in the land, human cargo aborted to the land to turn souls into profit, with the lavender-faced children of Muhammad in its belly. Back and forth on the Atlantic's throat, a mother raising her shackled hands to the heavens to beg Allah deliver his name until the famished mouths of her family fallen once again into chains, and we proclaim their shahada in the same position. Distant mother, I hope you'll see that the adhan is the 808 drum still shaking us to the atom, that sujood has dignified our posture yet again. Know that a third of this nation's children are black like you, bold like you, regal like you. That kinked hair falls in the spines of Qur'ans and valleys and mountaintops. We have never had a home here, but Lord knows we can turn a bando into paradise. Lord knows we can turn lemons into la ilaha illallah. Your down payment, just enough for us to buy our Maulana's religion in cold cash. You should see we've made space here. Baba's Arabic gorgeously broken over a southern twang. Sora Nas under a northern bebop. Can't shake the jazz out our step. Can't peel the boom bap off our lips. For us, this has always been about burning Master's house to the ground and dancing in the ashes. A stadium full of our ancestors looking on. This theology has always been about a solstice of justice, a parade of freedom marching through the soul, a return home. So one day the giver of light sees the light on our faces, sees us for our faces and welcomes us back beyond the veil.
You were just listening to Tariq Touré. Our community has words about that piece you just heard. Mama Cam Camila Rashad on Twitter says, what an awesome gift Tariq Touré's art is to our community and to the world. I had the pleasure of receiving an advance copy of his second volume of poetry, from which that piece was just from. My thoughts reading that work: 2 Parts Oxygen is an emotional tour de force, resonating on a cellular level. It is honest, raw, and unflinchingly authentic. So as you were reading that, we actually got a comment live on YouTube from Sephora, and Sephora says, how do we move Black Muslim poets out of the niche category and have it seen as a fully Muslim or Islamic poetic form of expression? And I would also say mainstream then. How do you make this mainstream? Do you think there is a way, or does it need to be? Tariq?
I think our responsibility as poets, and definitely with these 2 phenomenal people next to us, to Sister Sephora, I would say that our job is to continue writing, and the people who produce the shows, we'll work with them to see if we can get platform more, but our job is to write and convey as authentically as possible, and that should be our focus. As far as a niche category, our Islam is also rooted in expressing our experiences in coming to Islam and being Muslim and all of that, and all of those things are intertwined. My mother, she became Muslim by becoming a part of, Black liberation movement and things like that, and being interested and deeply involved in trying to find herself in a society that didn't want her. And then she became Muslim because that was the answer for her. So they can't be detached. For me, it isn't particularly a niche. So, yeah.
Poets, writers, all the way through this show, the precision of your poetry is beautiful. I can see you appreciating each other's poetry, but I want our audience to see what it's like when an audience appreciates their poetry. It's kind of like a world concert. Have a look at what Mohamed does to audiences when he gets on stage.
History repeats itself, and that's just how it goes. Same way that these cops always take my brother's souls. Same thing Darren Wilson did to Mike Brown, yeah, we know. Trayvon Martin, Eric Garner, Amadou Diallo. Trayvon Martin, Eric Garner, Amadou Diallo.
Sadiyah, you know the words to that. Is that like a hit song? Is that like a hit poem?
Honestly, no.
Yeah?
It was like, especially that year, it was like everyone knew that poem.
Yeah.
Everybody was going around.
Do the right thing.
Yes, do the right thing. I mean, it starts off, he's like, I got a target on my body, somebody. Literally, people will come up to him and be like, I got a target on my body, somebody.
They don't say what's up.
How you doing?
No,
So when you're on stage and the audience is feeling you and you are feeling them, just in a word, each of you, describe that feeling, Mohamed.
Humbling.
Sadiyah.
Kinetic.
Charged. Yeah.
So we just got this question in, and it's looking forward. This is Zuleika, and she says, in your life, what is getting your pen going? So I'm pushing that forward to 2019.
That's Zuleika Hussein from our team.
I'm not sure, so I can't say. I'm not sure. But we do have a member of our team named Zuleika. So what is getting your pen moving for 2019? Sadiyah?
Honestly, it's like, for me, I feel like I'm finally in a place where I'm comfortable with my vulnerability in poetry. A lot of times when poets start out, it's like, we're saving the world, and now I'm vulnerable and I love it. So that's where it's going. It's just vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that's pushing my pen is just trying to create a world where I feel comfortable and safe to be able to express myself in however I feel comfortable.
And Tariq, you get the last word.
I think for me, it's just knowing and recognizing right now that we're archiving history in our art form, and that, the books that I've read and all of that were people who, whether intentionally or not intentionally, did that. So just to be able to participate is amazing.
Poets, writers, it's been such a pleasure having you on the stream. Luke and I will see you always online. We're at AJ Stream. Take care, everybody.